Pediatric Obesity by Julie Ives. Food 4660 Clinical Nutrition Practicum, Spring 2018. The objectives of this presentation will be to define pediatric obesity and explain the etiology. Participants will be able to list the associated risk and comorbid conditions related to pediatric obesity. They will be able to state the incidence and prevalence of the disorder, and they will be able to understand the usual outcomes and prognosis of a child diagnosed with pediatric obesity. The participant will be able to explain the M&T and nutrition care process for this particular associated disorder. Childhood obesity is a complex health issue, and it occurs when a child is well above the normal or healthy weight for their age and height. For clinical settings, BMI, BIA, and waist circumference are used to measure obesity in children. CDC recommends using a relative BMI measure to describe youth with obesity. BMI for Class 1 obesity is greater than or equal to the 95th percentile. Class 2 BMI is greater than or equal to 120% of the 95th percentile. In Class 3, BMI is defined as greater than or equal to 140% of the 95th percentile. The body mass index is the accepted standard measure of overweight and obesity for children 2 years of age and older. It provides a guideline for weight in relation to height and is equal to the body weight in kilograms divided by the height in meters squared. Research has made important contributions to the understanding of the factors associated for obesity for the pediatric population, including dietary intake, physical activity, sedentary behavior. The impact of such risk factors is influenced by age, gender, and family characteristics of parenting style. Environmental factors also play a big role in the risk factors for obesity. What type of activity and eating they're exposed to in a school environment or a community environment or a home environment. Also, the demands of socio and cultural factors placed on a child influence their dietary intake, their perceptions and ideas of food and healthy food, as well as religious factors, all influence the child's dietary intake and physical activity. Psychosocial factors also play a role as the risk factors for obesity. Again, this includes their beliefs and attitudes towards food, meal composition, mealtime structure, as well as, in general, what a healthy food is. Obesity is the most prevalent nutritional disorder among children and adolescents in the U.S. Approximately 16 to 18% of U.S. youths are obese. The prevalence of obesity is highest among specific ethnic groups and has definitely increased significantly in recent years. It is considered a major health concern in the U.S. The NHANES recent survey indicates that the prevalence of obesity is increasing in all pediatric age groups, in both males and females, and in various ethnic and racial groups. The prevalence of pediatric obesity in ethnic groups such as Hispanics, Blacks, American Indians, and Hawaiians is 10 to 40% higher than in Caucasians. Puerto Rican, Cuban American, and Native American preschoolers have an increased incidence of obesity. Black, Native American, Puerto Rican, Mexican, and Native Hawaiian school-age children have the highest rates of obesity in this younger age group. About 25% of American Black youths are obese. The mechanism of obesity development is not fully understood and is believed to be a disorder with multiple causes. It is widely accepted that increase in obesity results from an imbalance between energy intake and energy output, with an increase in positive energy balance being closely associated with lifestyle adaptation and dietary intake preferences. There is supporting evidence that excessive sugar intake by soft drink and sugary foods and high carbohydrates, increased portion sizes, and steady decline in physical activity play major roles in the pathophysiology of obesity. Nutrition of the mother during pregnancy and early childhood is critical for healthy child growth and development. A recent review of factors contributing to childhood obesity identified risk factors present during pregnancy, including high maternal prepregnancy BMI, excess maternal gestational weight gain, gestational diabetes, high infant birth weight, and rapid infant weight gain influence the risk for obesity in childhood. In times of intake of abundance of food, very efficient fat storage results in the excessive storage of fat, eventually resulting in obesity. The body naturally being able to store fatty acids within hepatocytes protects against fatty acid toxicity in the body. A cascade of physiological events with excessive fat storage and fat utilization in the body contributes to fat deposits in organs, and this triggers the cascade of physiological events which cause obesity in the pediatric population. The comorbidities of obesity in childhood and adolescence include abnormalities in the endocrine, cardiovascular, gastrointestinal, pulmonary, orthopedic, neurologic, dermatologic, and psychosocial systems. And they are as well limited in their physical function. Certain comorbidities, such as type 2 diabetes, steatohepatitis, are usually considered as adult diseases, but now they are being seen more regularly in obese children populations. Obesity during adolescence increases risk for disease and premature death during adulthood, independent of obesity during childhood. The usual outcome and prognosis of a child diagnosed with pediatric obesity is that there is a greater risk of overweight and obesity in adulthood, as well as a risk of negative health consequences in childhood, as the ones mentioned on the previous slide. Also, there is an increased risk of developing diabetes, type 2, cardiovascular disease, and certain cancers associated with obesity. Also, all of these increase the risk of behavioral consequences, such as self-esteem and confidence. Some of these associated risks and conditions are reversible with weight loss and lifestyle changes in a timely manner. Patient S was a patient that was seen at Duke Pediatric Healthy Lifestyles Clinic for obese children. Patient S is a female that is a little over 8 years old. She lives in a family situation with mom, dad, and older sister, and often visits family members such as her godparents on the weekends. She is of Mexican descent, and she attends church weekly with her family. The patient has a family history of hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and obesity in her mother, ADD, ADHD, bipolar disorder, and obesity with her sister, chronic kidney disease, diabetes mellitus, hypertension, obesity, sleep apnea, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease in her maternal grandmother, breast cancer with her paternal grandmother, and hypertension with her paternal grandfather. The patient has been diagnosed with many disorders, as you see listed on the slide. The main ones of concern are her insulin resistance syndrome, vitamin D deficiency, elevated uric acid in her blood, her acanthos nigrans BERT grade 4, which is indicative of her obesity, as well as her low HDL and snoring associated with possible sleep apnea from obesity. The patient was assessed on different dates at the clinic. Her most recent assessment includes a height of 142.3 centimeters, weight of 84.9 kilograms, a BMI of measure 42, blood pressure 123/47, and an obese classification of class 3. And as you can see from the data, her BMI has risen in the past couple years, as well as her growth. She has gained height status, but her class 3 obesity has remained the same. Recent lab values in January of 2018 indicate a low HDL, an A1C within normal limits, a vitamin D total of less than optimal, and an increased uric acid reading, which is closely associated with dietary intake of processed foods and low vegetable and fruit intake. Patient diet history was assessed in the clinic by a registered dietitian. A typical daily intake reported was estimated at 1910 kilocalories. A typical daily intake reported was eggs cooked with tomatoes, chilies, onions, beans, and juice for breakfast, vegetable salad and ranch dressing for lunch, a snack in the morning of grapes or strawberries with cheese, a snack in the evening of graham crackers and milk, and for dinner, spaghetti with meat sauce, salad, and sweet tea. A 24-hour recall estimated kilocalories at 1,285. The patient reported no breakfast, but only water with her medication, a school hot dog, an orange, and water, which was about 10:30 in the morning at school, an AM snack of hot Cheetos, and an afternoon snack of a yogurt strawberry, with dinner consisting of fried chicken and corn oil, Brunswick stew, and potato salad. These estimated kilocalories were achieved using SuperTracker Food Tracker on USDA.gov. Using the Mifflin-St. Jean equation for estimating energy intake, the patient's EER was estimated at 1,537 kilocalories. And as you can see from the previous slide, with her typical daily intake, this is about 1,900 calories, although her 24-hour recall dietary intake was significantly lower than 1900 estimated typical daily intake. So perhaps that 24-hour recall did not project a typical day. So for this patient and for weight maintenance, it's recommended that the patient intake about 1,500 calories or less if she were to achieve weight loss. I included 3 nutrition diagnoses for this patient. The first one focused on excessive energy intake. Excessive energy intake related to food intake that exceeded energy needs and high density quality of food choices, as evidenced by patient-reported diet history and elevated BMI of 42. The second one focused on her low vitamin D status. Suboptimal vitamin D intake from dietary sources related to inconsistent intake of dietary sources of vitamin D to meet daily need of 600 units per day as evidenced by vitamin D deficiency. The third related to the patient's low physical activity. Physical inactivity related to reported inconsistent physical activity to meet 60-minute daily goal for fitness and energy balance as evidenced by muscle deconditioning, elevated BMI, and metabolic risk factors such as a low HDL. At the clinic of Duke Pediatric Healthy Lifestyles, the obesity treatment plan for this patient was a lifestyle intervention. For the nutrition intervention, this would include a review of carbohydrate quality sources, discussion on limiting refined carbohydrates and added sugars in the patient's diet, an intervention including a review of a balanced plate model for portion sizes, a review of vitamin D sources to increase dietary intake. Intervention also includes meal and snack structure, as well as goals, which include recognizing hunger and how hungry you are using a hunger meter, finding ways to move more by increasing physical activity during the day, focusing on vegetable and proteins for meals with small amount of starches and grains. Monitoring and evaluation, looking at physical, behavioral, and lifestyle changes is the focus versus weight loss for the pediatric obese patient. Indicators I would monitor and evaluate would be weight, height, and BMI for patient, as well as the significant lab values of the lower vitamin D, the high uric acid, the low HDL, as well as monitoring her glucose and A1C to rule out pediatric diabetes. Also, the monitoring and evaluation of the family and the individual's meal and snack structure, as well as looking at the physical activity the patient is doing to see if more needs to be added throughout her week or day. For literature review, I looked at 4 articles. From the EAL, I looked at the recommendation for pediatric weight management, family participation in multi-component pediatric weight management interventions. I looked at an article by Coffenden titled School-Based Intervention versus Family-Based Interventions in the Treatment of Childhood Obesity. I then looked at prevention of excess weight gain in pediatric primary care, beverages only or multiple lifestyle factors. And the last article I looked at and reviewed was faster eating rates are associated with higher energy intakes during an ad libitum meal, higher BMI, and greater adiposity among 4.5-year-old children. For the evidence analysis library, with pediatric weight management, family participation in multi-component pediatric weight management interventions, the recommendations by the EAL were that the registered dietitians should encourage family participation as an integral part of the multi-component pediatric weight management intervention for children of all ages. Research indicates that family involvement is a big component of pediatric weight management intervention and is highly consistent with positive weight status outcomes at both 6 and 12 months. The evidence that supports this recommendation looked at a total of 73 studies using a qualitative comparative analysis. The conclusion for this EAL recommendation was that including family involvement as part of pediatric weight management intervention is highly consistent with positive weight status outcomes at 6 months and 12 months. This article was by Koth and Den, and it was published in the Archives of Public Health in 2014. It is titled School-Based Interventions versus Family-Based Interventions in the Treatment of Childhood Obesity, a Systematic Review. The purpose of this review was to provide current evidence from documented studies seeking to compare the outcomes of school-based intervention with family-based intervention for the treatment of obesity in children. This was a research review. The study included 13 family-based and school-based interventions. The family-based interventions were numbered at 8, and the school-based interventions were numbered at 5. These included large group interventions with the total participants numbering at 2,067. The participants were ages 6 to 17 years old, and the study lasted from 1 to 3 years. Databases were used to search for primary research papers with certain inclusion criteria and included a randomized controlled trial and quasi-randomized controlled trial based on family and school-based interventions for obesity. The results showed that family-based interventions did demonstrate effectiveness for children and weight loss between the ages of 12 and 17, and there were differences seen for both long-term and short-term results. The conclusion from this review was that family and school-based interventions do have an effect on treating obesity in children. This depends on age, how long the intervention is, as well as quality of intervention methods. It's recommended that further research take place to determine the effectiveness of both of these interventions. The second article was by Stetler et al., published in 2015 in Pediatric Obesity. The title is Prevention of Excess Weight Gain in Pediatric Primary Care, Beverages Only or Multiple Lifestyle Factors, the SMART STEP Study, a cluster randomized clinical trial. The purpose of this was to test a theory-based behavior modification intervention delivered by trained pediatric primary care providers for the prevention of obesity in the pediatric population. It was a cluster randomized efficacy trial. 172 children were tested. They were between the ages of 8 and 12 years old. In the control group, there were 33 individuals. In the intervention group, there were 139 individuals. Subjects were introduced to a 12-session, 12-month sweetened beverage decrease intervention or a comprehensive dietary and physical activity intervention, and both were compared with a control intervention. The results were that the increase in body mass index for the 139 subjects randomized to the obesity intervention groups was less than that of the 33 individuals randomized to the control group. The incidences of obesity and excess weight gain were lower in the obesity intervention groups, but the number of the subjects was small. In conclusion, obesity prevention intervention delivered by pediatric primary care clinicians supported the impact of children's BMI. BMI was lower with intervention. The third article reviewed was by Fogel et al., titled Faster Eating Rates Are Associated with Higher Energy Intake During Ad Libitum Meal, Higher BMI, and Greater Adiposity Among 4.5-year-old Children. This was published in the British Journal of Nutrition, 2017. The purpose of this was to examine whether children who eat faster consume more energy, and this was to determine if this rate of eating is associated with higher weight status and adiposity in children. This was a clinical trial ad libitum meal study. 386 parent-child groups were included in the study from 3 different ethnic populations: Chinese, Indian, and Malay. There were 202 boys and 184 girls in the study. The children from this study were included in the Growing Up in Singapore Towards Healthy Outcomes Gusto cohort. The methods used for this ad libitum meal study were videos were coded for 3 eating behaviors. They included biting, chewing, and swallowing of food to derive a measure of eating rate, grams per minute. Body mass index and anthropomorphic measurements were measured. Children also underwent MRI scannings to measure abdominal, subcutaneous, and visceral fat. Children above or below the median eating rate were categorized as slower or faster eatings and compared across body composition measurements. The results of this study include a strong positive relationship between eating rate and energy intake. It showed a positive linear relationship between eating rate and children's BMI status, as well as showed that faster eaters consumed 75% more calories than slower eaters, and they had higher whole body and subcutaneous adiposity in their abdominal region. Conclusions and limitations for this study show that the research article claims that eating rate mediates the link between child weight and energy intake during a meal. Children who ate faster had higher energy intake, and this was associated with increased BMI and adiposity. Areas to address for future study of pediatric obesity include healthcare system changes, meeting the needs of our children's health through examining what current healthcare system is provided and seeking out changes to promote healthy lifestyle change for children in the obese population. Another area to address would be the marketing production of processed food products and beverages, as well as analyzing the school lunch programs and making changes to promote health and healthy eating for children in all of U.S. schools. Another area to address would be school physical fitness programs and trying to incorporate healthy and physical movement for children of all ages in all schools in the U.S. Another area to address would be looking at community programs and interventions on healthy lifestyles and nutrition education, and promoting healthy lifestyle changes for whole families and children, especially those in the obese population. Looking at community improvement to promote access to safe physical fitness, as well looking into community improvement to promote local seasonal produce acquisition to help increase fruits and vegetables in the daily diets of children in the community.